Hello and welcome to another convo with the columns. Today's topic is the value of a good question,
Mm,
why it matters. What would you say?
goodness, lots of reasons. Lots of reasons. I think it goes back first and foremost to if you ask a good question, that is proof that you're staying in curiosity instead of hiding behind judgments, which was another conversation we had.
Yes.
So you hear that often like listening to respond instead of listening to understand. And and I think that plays into that.
So unpack that a little bit. Explain the difference.
Well, I think whenever, especially in conflict, or if you are approaching a conversation with an agenda, then often you will, yeah, listen to defend your agenda. Listen to defend your opinion, or listen to, you've already got your mind made up in either about that person or the situation or the topic or whatever. And so you're not going to approach it with curiosity.
Hmm.
And questions to me just highlights that the person is more interested in me, what's going on inside of me and the way I process and my view, than it is them interested in just proving a point. And so I love questions. Plus, too, I think it highlights whenever we truly walk in love for our neighbor, our fellow being, then we will stay in a place of curiosity instead of judgments. Because fear creates judgments, and love keeps us in curiosity.
Has there been a time that you remember a question that really shifted something for you?
Yes. One of the first questions I remember you asking, and it was before we were really even dating, but you said, well, it was actually a statement, but you said, you don't know what you don't know. So what do you not know? And that drove me, like, that kept me up that night. Like, I don't know what I don't know. What do I not know? I was just like, I don't know a lot of things. And so I think, yes, there's so many questions. And I know you and I have even created a culture in our home with our friends, like our friends share the same culture, that we ask each other hard questions.
Sure.
And so I think recently a friend asked me, who told you that? And that was a powerful question. And so I love questions. I love hard questions that always, I like hard questions that lead me back to my motive and my identity.
Yeah, it it seems ironic to me that the more that you visit with people, regardless of how much relational equity there is or isn't, stranger or a long-standing relationship, just how little people know how to ask questions.
Hmm.
And so for you and I being occupationally in a position as coaches, that is the sole responsibility is to ask questions because from a coaching position, we hold the perspective that the answer to a person's problem lies within themselves, but often they just haven't had the chance to be asked enough questions to get to that point.
Hmm.
Um, but but I'm often fascinated at, to your point originally, people ask questions to defend versus people ask questions for curiosity. How many people are prone to want or need to have an outlet to say something?
Hmm. Yeah, we both grew up in, we've talked about this in religious environments where you're talked at so often. And I have a high value for teaching. Like, I love, you and I both consume a lot of information. So I love teachings, but I think there's even a difference when mentors or coaches or even pastors can learn to ask questions. In the Bible, Jesus asked over 300 questions.
Mm.
He was constantly asking people questions. And I love that. And he was all knowing. So if Jesus could walk in curiosity, why can't we? I even love the story of the woman at the well for so many reasons, but one of the reasons is he knew, like, he was reading her mail, but he still asked a question, "Where's your husband?" Knowing, and he was just inviting her into a conversation. And I think oftentimes when we just begin to invite people into a conversation, it gives us an opportunity to begin to understand what their fears are and then partner with truth. But if we're constantly talking at them, we'll never really fully see them or know them. We'll never really be able to partner with bringing them back to who God created them to be.
In the position of all knowing, I think that gets to be a tricky spot though.
Okay.
So in that perspective of Jesus being all knowing, yet he still asks questions. Sometimes the challenge that I find with people is that it very much comes from a different place. Somebody showing up with knowledge, I have watched where they still have leading questions.
Mhm.
So one can make the argument, I'm not saying that that is the position of Jesus with the woman at the well at all.
Mhm.
One can make the argument that he asked that knowing, which would have been a leading question. But
Yeah.
I like what you said in that he posed a question to invite a conversation.
Go back to the Garden of Eden. I mean, that was the very first conversation that's recorded, and you have God asking Adam and Eve, "Where are you?"
Mhm.
He knew where they were, but I think too there's, even in that, like, he's inviting them, like, "Are you gonna be truthful? Are you gonna trust that I'm safe?" And so I think that's even, yeah, something that I think questions cultivate is safety in conversation. Yeah.
Do you sense this is where there's so many nuances in the topic,
Mhm.
because if we think about toddlers that would ask questions incessantly
Mhm.
versus an adult that asks questions incessantly,
Mm.
I have both lost patience with a toddler asking a lot and maybe more of an adult asking a lot. What do you think determines the difference in asking a lot of questions?
I think good questions.
What would you
Again,
define as a good question?
I think good questions are open-ended questions. The who, what, how, why can get tricky. But so just really asking those open-ended questions that challenge, again, people's thinking, that it's not a simple yes or no. Like, it really requires them to think about where that belief came from or where that fear came from or whatever we're processing or asking about. It helps others even really think about what they're saying when you ask an open-ended question.
And for the sake of maybe somebody that doesn't know the difference,
Mhm.
clarify what an open-ended question is versus not.
Yeah, an open-ended question would require more than a yes or no answer.
Okay.
Yeah. So, again, most of the time, if you ask, like, if your question begins with who, what, how, why, when, it's gonna require some thinking outside of yes or no. You're gonna have to respond with more words. So that gives you, yeah, just more insight again into that person, like, and it helps that person be fully seen and known whenever you hear more about them.
If you think about your personal journey, again, occupationally, we're taught to ask questions, but do you feel like that you innately had that perspective all along, or is it a skill that you've cultivated?
Both. I can look back when I was younger and, um, you talking about that curiosity as a toddler, just asking not my parents so many questions, but I remember asking God a lot of questions. And even he still will often ask me questions in dialogue. And even when I found Jesus and would have conversations with Jesus, I would often hear him ask me questions instead of tell me things. So I think I look back now and I know that was the way it was already put in me, that curiosity. I think we're all created with curiosity, but I think that was just something that God has already created me for, knowing this would be our passion. But it was definitely a skill practiced. I still believe God will tell us things and sometimes even highlight traumas and things whenever we're coaching people. And I still like to always pose it as a question, because I also think there's power in whenever somebody else identifies what is holding them back
Sure.
and their fears. And when they have the ability to articulate, to say those fears out loud, they actually lose so much power. So if
The
we're
fears.
the fears lose so much power, and then you can invite, truth to come and love to come and speak truth back into them. And so I don't like to give people their answers. I feel like you're
Sure.
robbed of so much whenever you give people their answers. I don't have their answers.
Right. I think this is a statement that we share often, or at least articulate often, in that we're never going to be responsible for the conscience that you go to sleep with.
Yep.
What do you feel like would be a reason that more people than not are prone to talk at rather than with others, whether it be in a mentorship role? I see that a lot. People will define mentorship as, because I'm further down the journey than you, let me tell you how to do this. Let me make myself available to advise you
Mhm.
on how you probably ought to navigate this, rather than, yes, I have some life experience and a lot more time at this than you. How
Mhm.
can I just ask you questions so that
Mhm.
you have maybe a sage to know what questions to ask? What do you think is the difference in people not asking?
Well, the first thing I think is ego. I think it does feel good when you have life experience and you have a lot of knowledge. And I wouldn't even say ego, like as a parent, like you want to pass that on. If someone taught me, there really is a passion to teach our kids what my grandmother and what my mom taught me, even around femininity and being a wife and being a mom, just the really practical things. You want to teach that. I think that's a passion for healthy fathers and mothers. But I also think it gets back to that right or wrong, those judgments that I believe are cultivated out of fear. And even as a parent, which I have, but if I get into fear, and it's going to come across maybe more dictatorship than staying in a place of curiosity to cultivate identity. I don't know if I'm explaining that clear enough.
Well, yeah, I mean, I understood what you said.
Yeah.
What I heard you say is, from a parenting perspective, if you see a child making choices that you know is gonna cost you, telling them how they're messing up isn't going to encourage their confidence in their decision making,
Yeah, so I think even with that as parents,
which I've been very guilty of.
I was with the older 2 for sure, was just learning identity and tried to speak identity into them, but didn't ask enough questions. I didn't stay in a place of curiosity with the older 2. And so, what we have tried to cultivate, though, in the last decade is when we see our kids making choices that maybe we know don't align with their identity and who they are and even their values, then we will ask like, "Hey, tell me what's going on inside of you. What are you afraid of right now?" And try to let them process that. I do think whenever there is an opportunity to speak truth back over your kids, that gets really powerful, which to me truth is speaking over them what I believe God created them to, who God created them to be. And so affirming them in their identity. Yeah. I think it goes back to every action is a direct correlation to who we believe we are in the moment, right? Behaviors are just a reflection of what we're believing about ourselves.
Sure.
And so whenever you see a behavior that isn't aligning with truth of who somebody is, who God created them to be, I think if we were just to go straight to truth, right? I call it white knuckling. It's just like you're just telling your kid the truth, but you're not giving them space to process the lie. You're not giving them space to process the fear. You're not giving them a safe place to process the shame or whatever they may be experiencing. And so they're never fully going to be able to release that.
100% agree. What I also have a lot of intolerance for, though, is that when somebody has had space to process, but they're still habitually wanting to declare things that aren't true, that is oftentimes I find myself articulating truth in lieu of asking more questions,
Mhm.
because this also becomes some of the unique maybe attributes of our characters. This gets tricky because discernment is oftentimes easily mistaken as judgment.
Mhm.
And you had alluded to this earlier, when we're coaching people, it is still amazing to me that God might reveal to us things about another person before the other person shares.
Right.
But I think there's also in this space, I can't say that I haven't done this. Let's say if it's a client, right? And it's a first conversation. I can't say that I haven't been guilty of this, because I think even just practicing holding space
Mhm.
is just that, right? You
Mhm.
have to put reps in.
Mhm.
I would relate it a lot to like horsemanship. There's going to be certain things that I did without knowing early on in my journey with horses versus creating the sensitivity around that. But it poses another interesting layer in this, because we often don't just view things linear, one dimensional, if you will, or maybe even two dimensional, right? If it's me to you, and let's say I'm a client, you're a coach, like that would be two dimension, right?
Mhm.
Because you have a role to play, I have a role to play in the interaction of a one-to-one conversation. But you and I hold the perspective that it's three-dimensional because there are other entities. Technically, I guess it'd be four if you wanted to be. There is opposition, and then there is affirmation and truth.
Mhm.
And so what I recognize is there becomes a point where I lose patience for opposition driving the conversation. How do you navigate those situations? What would be the kind of the litmus for you?
Yeah, I think there isn't a formula, and we say that often.
Sure.
So for me, it's just listening. It's a lot of listening. So I'm listening to the person across from me, and I'm also listening to Holy Spirit. And just it's just constantly just listening. And to your point, I think there have been times where I have felt like led just in the first conversation just to speak life and hope into someone because they weren't even in a space to begin to start identifying fears. Like
Mm,
they needed some hope to grab onto first.
mhm.
And so just listening for those moments, I think to your point, you talked about, which I do love this about you, your intolerance for opposition comes in very handy, especially when we're working together. For me, I truly believe my greatest weapon against opposition is compassion and peace. And so oftentimes, if I feel myself get out of peace, I know I've lost my authority.
Mm,
So my first, and I can recognize it just out of practice super fast. And so the first thing I want to do is find my peace, and which is through Holy Spirit, just reminding me, no, you're with me. You are so in this conversation. You would never leave. And you're just as compassionate about this person across from me getting set free as I am,
Right.
more so. And what an honor that I get to be across from them. So for me, it's just a huge awareness of where's my peace and my compassion, because that's where my authority lies. Sometimes that doesn't always look, maybe to someone that is unfamiliar. So, I mean, that doesn't always look quiet. Sometimes a peacemaker or a peace creator comes in with that authority, sometimes doesn't always look passive, maybe, but I can feel the shift that happens inside of me if I've lost my peace or not. Yeah.
As you were talking about peace being a barometer for you, we have frequently came into this topic in various conversations where we describe the synergy between emotional intelligence and spiritual intelligence. And Romans 14:17 reads that the kingdom of God is not of eating and drinking, but of righteousness, peace, and joy in the Holy Spirit.
Mhm.
And so if you take the sentence, if your thoughts control your emotions and your emotions control your actions, and that's the backdrop, then righteousness is us believing in who he says that we are.
Mhm.
It's
Right.
us believing our right standing.
Yes.
Peace is actually us managing ourselves. And then joy is the authentic expression of ourselves.
Yeah. Are saying the same thing, we just dialogue it differently. My righteousness to me is my I amness in him, who he says I am. And then my peace comes from trusting him and what he says about me. My peace comes from trusting who he says he is and who he says I am. And then, yeah. And then from that, there's just an overflow of joy. Yeah.
But but I think on the topic of joy, right, that
Mhm.
being almost like the culmination of your thoughts controlling your emotions and your emotions controlling your actions, joy's probably not going to be one of the first descriptors that somebody has of me. And an honest confession, that's something that I continue to want to work through. But I also find how much joy shows up in an atmosphere when I am intolerant of spiritual opposition to the person.
Mhm.
And when they stop making those types of agreements or listening to opposition, I can see a shift in that person. Now,
Mhm.
it may not ultimately manifest in joy, but definitely peace shows up.
Mhm. Yes. Yeah.
Whereas I think there is a lot of times that you lead with such a softness. Yeah, there's this beautiful dance that when we get to minister together, whether it's one-on-one or in groups, somebody's showing up, you bring a softness that is so inviting that allows people to settle into something that maybe their life experience wouldn't permit them to do.
Mm.
The nurturing side is still very, I think, akin to curiosity. And when safety isn't a part of curiosity, I mean, you can be, well, maybe you can't be curious without an agenda. Do you think you can?
Well, I don't know, 'cause that's a great question. Because I think I wouldn't say I go into a coaching call without a heart to wanna see whoever's across from me get breakthrough. So that in itself is kind of an agenda, but I think I also just release that to God too, because that's nothing I can control. I can't be controlled to somebody's outcome. So I guess really my agenda going into a call with someone or even a conversation, not even a call, just a conversation with a friend or a conversation with you, like my goal or agenda would be to be the safest person I can be for whoever's sitting across from me. And so whenever I'm thinking about if there was an agenda, it would be that would be my agenda, and it requires curiosity to be safe. So, I don't know. I can feel too, I think most people could if they were honest, when judgments arise versus curiosity. I know, I can feel if I'm pushing an agenda. And when I choose to say, okay, I mean, I can just say, hey, Millie, you're pushing an agenda. Like, get back into your curiosity. It's way more fun. It's way more fun to stay in
For sure.
curiosity than it is judgment anyway.
Yeah.
So I would say if I have an agenda, for me, my ultimate agenda is just to be the safest person I can be for whoever is across from me, which requires curiosity to be safe.
So, on the topic of questions and why they matter, what else would you add to it?
I think, well, there's so many things I want to add. Like creativity, I think comes from curiosity. Solutions come from curiosity. Leaders like lead better from a place of curiosity. Yeah, there's so much, like I said, I think there's so much joy in curiosity when you can lay down your judgments and just get curious around your circumstance, around the people in front of you. Like, fear is what drives judgments, and judgments is the greatest opposition to curiosity. And so when we stay in loving each other well, we're going to stay in a place of curiosity. And yeah, I think I often wonder, like, what would be invented? What would our kids have permission to engage in a healthy way
Mm.
if we cultivated more curiosity? Yeah, I watch some parents that are raising their kids with so much curiosity. I think that's another reason we love being in nature because it often poses way more questions than it gives answers.
Give an example.
Man, I think you just have to step outside and listen to the sounds, sunsets, sunrises, stars. I don't know, the moon. It all poses, it's all so big. You can't help but stare at the sky and wonder, have so many questions. Because who can figure all that out? I can't,
Hmm.
right? Like, I don't know. It's just stand beside an ocean. That'll open up all sorts of curiosity, question after question after question. We go to the mountains, marvel at that. That's just, I think that is even a reflection of curiosity, is the awness of God we'll never fully understand.
Yeah, I think that's a very good statement.
And just, I think if we all really realize that we're all created in the image of God, the awness that we would have for one another and just get curious about the way God created them and the beauty that He created within them and pulling that out of them.
How would you go about trying to teach or cultivate questions in a person?
I think the first step is for someone to get curious about themselves because you can't give what you don't have. And we've talked about this a lot. The more someone judges themselves, the more they're going to judge other people. So, teaching that person, which all of this, I think even curiosity, um, it's cultivated best in community.
What about the person that says, but curiosity killed the cat?
I don't know who said that.
It's a saying.
I know. Where did it come from? Who told us? Who told us that? Yeah.
I can't Google it because my phone's another camera. So,
Yeah. We've been told lots of things that aren't true.
well, it is a statement that somebody shared.
For sure. No, I've heard it. But my curiosity is, where did it come from? Who told us that? Yeah. So I don't know. I'm curious now. I don't know.
Well, watching the behaviors of cats, that seems very appropriate.
Yeah. Boundaries. It all goes back to truth, right? Curiosity should lead us to truth. Matter of fact, I would say curiosity ultimately will lead us to truth.
I would just take a second to be an advocate to the antagonist side of that,
Okay.
because I think that there are a lot of people that get curious about a lot of things. It takes them into bondage.
For sure.
Now, what I can agree with is if we're upstream, if they're not operating in who they are,
Hmm.
yes, but just a general statement of curiosity will always lead you to truth. I don't know that that ends up being a definitive for me.
Yes. I think I'm thinking of it in light of eternity. Maybe. But yes. That's my
Because
curiosity that I have followed even against. I wouldn't even say if I would have stayed curious, I probably wouldn't have chosen the things I chose. If I would have had the tools to challenge, hey Millie, is this choice being made out of fear or love? Then I wouldn't. If I would have had community to say, hey Millie, are your choices aligning with love, who you are, right? And then
Mhm.
had someone challenge my out of curiosity, help me challenge my motives, challenge am I aligning with who I am? I wouldn't have made choices out of alignment of who I am,
Sure.
right? I believe we make choices outside of who God created us to be because we're not curious, because we're not asking the question, who
Well,
am I? What am I being motivated by right now? Am I afraid or am I being led from love?
true, but if a person hasn't been subjected to that, how do they even get started? That's rhetorical because I would go back to this conversation pattern right here instigated off of how would somebody go about getting better at questions, right?
Yeah.
So if we go back to your statement of the garden, Eve
Mhm.
got curious without any opposition.
Well, she had opposition.
No, she did not. There was no awareness of the knowledge of good and evil prior to her actually entertaining a conversation. There's no biblical history that says that there was opposition to her until that point.
Well, she
So
had the serpent, which I would say is opposition.
I'm not disagreeing with that statement.
Okay.
What I'm trying to follow though is curiosity by itself, if it's in fear,
If it's in fear.
will always find a way to get us in bondage. And in that moment, she had never experienced anything but perfect love outside of opposition being in proximity to communicate a question, and that question being curiosity around is what is said true? But there was no accountability to her weighing the two. I see that as the difference.
Yeah.
And so, in
So
the
good.
absence of Adam doing his part in accountability, then she entertains curiosity that takes her away from truth.
Mhm. So good. That's true.
And so, what I am in agreement with you around is that fundamentally, when we know
Mhm.
the truth can keep us in a place of curiosity because we see other people are not functioning from a place of truth or
Yes.
identity, authentic identity, right? And so, what then I'm hearing you say is community perhaps becomes a catalyst for good questions.
Absolutely. And I wanna circle back, like, when you said, "How do you teach someone to ask good questions?" Again, I would say start the best way is for them to get curious around themselves and with someone that can help them identify where they're afraid and what their truth is. And then again, that's where that community comes in. Honestly, I think when we talk about accountability, to me, that's what accountability looks like, is someone in community that knows me, that will ask me the hard questions and say, "Hey, Millie, how is this aligned with your identity? What's your motive right now? Are you motivated out of fear or are you motivated out of love? Like, what do you believe in is true about yourself right now?" Asking those questions that help me stay in alignment with truth and love. So that's I would say the first step would be get a coach, reach out.
We might be able to help you with this.
Yeah, reach out so we can help you get curious about yourself, and then that really is the best way, and I think even as you practice, even it's fun, like, even in our group, our friend group, our community, not everybody is a coach, but we all know how to ask open-ended hard questions to one another,
Mm,
and so, just that's our culture. That's just the way we communicate with one another.
mhm.
Yeah.
Anything else that you would want to add on the topic of good questions?
Well, I would love to hear your perspective. You do some mentorship. around horses and some mentorship spiritually. Like how, what are your thoughts? What do you think is the value of hard questions or questions? Not even hard questions, just questions.
Well, you've already alluded to probably the biggest reason that a good question is valuable is when a person comes to the conclusion that that's exactly what they want to commit to, thoughts, emotions, actions, right? I would process, going to be 50 this year. So my thoughts walking out there, interacting with a 2-year-old and starting them is not nearly as zealous as it was 5 or 10 years ago.
Understandable.
And so if I go back to a long history of being present with, younger kids wanting to learn horsemanship, being able to real time ask them a question on their decision, their action causes that. Why am I doing that? Or am I doing this because it's an assumption or an adopted pattern
Mhm.
that I'm replicating action in, right? So
Mhm.
I love the value of asking those questions again, this is my lens. I want somebody to know why I do something the way I do it. And I'm okay with being wrong if I come to another conclusion. But even as we experience this weekend, a big part of my life, I have been perceived as a lot, just as presence goes.
Just intense.
Right. I could be termed intense. I could be termed intimidating. I could be termed, all the things that would facilitate that perspective. And in seasons that I'm not healthy, that was 100% true.
Mhm.
But in seasons that I am healthy, if I am operating in love, the statement that I shared was when another person isn't okay with themselves, that's actually one of the biggest attributes that they value about me
Mhm.
because there is such a presence that there's not a lot of space that a person is going to feel unsafe in.
Mm.
So
Yeah.
when they don't run away from that big presence, now this is safety. So it's like refuge versus nurturing. I'm okay with messes. I just need to make sure that a person doesn't evacuate themselves from being present in order to see it to the other side.
Yeah.
And so what I loved in my season in helping people is we would be in a stall with a yearling and it would be really intense. And if they would trust my instruction and even my question, oftentimes it was me just asking what they were thinking in the moment or encouraging them to believe or envision, we'll use this tool sometimes with people, what's your ideal future? So think about the young horse that comes in that really isn't very good about picking up a hind leg and a kid's trying to subject themselves and really exposed and putting themselves towards the back end and this baby's kicking. It's like, what would it look like if you actually were able to manage this fear inside of you to the point where you knew that even though the horse was moving around, you still were eventually going to get to this point where you could confidently pick that foot up. And it doesn't mean that they have to sit there like a broke 15-year-old gelding, but what would it look like if you had that type of confidence both in yourself and in them that that was actually what was going to happen? And just the question of maybe an ideal perspective, an ideal future scenario, however you want to phrase that, was enough for them to grab a hold of that you would see a radical shift in the horse because now they begin to manage their emotion.
Yeah.
Oftentimes, I was able to intervene their little neural pathway
Yeah.
and then pull them over on a different ride, almost like they're on the little sidecar of a motorcycle with me,
Yeah.
going, here's my life experience. Jump in my sidecar, but you're going through the motions.
Yeah.
And I would watch them be able to succeed at something that they really had no confidence in on account of it wasn't me doing it for them, but it was interacting in those moments of I could see when their thoughts would take them in a different direction. And so in moments like that, it's almost like they're trying to bail out of the sidecar while you're going down, asphalt. Like you're going to get burned. But for me, there's a balance between knowing where we're going to go and what they want to do to get there.
Mhm.
So I think sometimes I have to stop and say, Do you want this? A lot of times people will say yes to things that they don't truly want.
Yeah.
Maybe there's an assumption or an expectation that they're supposed to be doing this, but if they don't want it, I just assume we acknowledge that. And
Mhm.
if that's not what they want, let's just stop because otherwise we are dealing with an opposition and that continues to show up.
Yeah. Yeah. What about spiritually? You talked about what you do. You are amazing about protecting, like you're such a protector of space and declaring truth into different spaces. So spiritually, when you're coaching someone, how do you stay in a place of curiosity when there's opposition?
That is still a challenge for me. Wanting to be mindful of, does this person have the capacity to hear this conversation in 2 parts? So I think some of it for me is really being mindful of that. Can they hear this multidimensional? And is there capacity for them to know where I'm talking to them or I'm talking about this spiritual interference? And I love what you said earlier. Sometimes a first conversation with somebody is just communicating hope and truth so that you can actually create equity, right? That's probably something that has to happen after several interactions for me with an individual. But I also get to the point where if that self protector is something they just don't want to break agreement with, and it's almost like their pacifier, right? They're blinky. If that brings them more comfort than the curiosity of a question, I'm gonna figure out how to mutually come to an agreement that we don't need to be working together anymore. And I'm okay with that because I love your statement. When I release another person from defining my self-worth, I give them permission to have their own journey. I may not be the person that has the grace for them to get the freedom that they need, and
Mhm.
I'm okay with that too.
Yeah.
So again, for me, a lot of it comes back to I wanna be careful that I'm not downsizing what God's given me to manage
Yes.
and steward.
Yeah.
Like, if I'm running around trying to actually be in shrink wrap, I'm probably not gonna help anybody.
Yeah.
But if a person can trust the safety and the protection that I bring in the bigness, then we're gonna be able to navigate a lot of that opposition. And even, this weekend, we got to experience just the curiosity with somebody,
Mhm.
and at the end of it, they were like, "I can breathe."
Yeah.
So to which I followed up, "Well, I don't really have tolerance for opposition," so that anxiety that had really just suffocated her, yeah, it would be hard to just say, "Well, the reason why you feel crazy is because you've never had a safe place to process anything that you've experienced."
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, I think one thing I've watched you do too is separating the person from the opposition.
Mhm.
And I think that when you can stay curious about the person, but go after the opposition, and I think you do that really well.
Yeah, to answer that question more specifically, sometimes I may be that candid with the conversation going, "Hey, I wanna address something, but I hope that you don't hear this through it being attacking you, but I do actually need to address something." And it feels, and then go into that type of conversation that way. Sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't. I mean, it's very much a timing thing, like you said,
Mhm.
of is there grace, is there permission? Is it a green light or is it yellow? And then if it's red, it's just for me to make note of and hold on to because there's not a grace in it.
Mhm. Yeah, so good.
What else?
Go ahead. I am curious, what was one of the first questions you ever remember being asked that stands out to you?
Oh, there's probably several. As it relates to you and I, the first real significant one was you asking why do I think Jesus never sinned? That would be the first pivotal question that I remember you asking or posing. Not that there weren't others, just that one in and of itself opened up considerations to things way more than what I had capacity to entertain prior to that point.
That's so interesting because we were sitting, I'll never forget, we were sitting on the couch watching a movie, and it was like, Jesus just interrupted the movie in my and he was like, "Hey, Millie, why do you think Jesus never sinned?" Like, I guess Holy Spirit was asking, and I was like, "Well, I don't know, because you were God." Yeah, and he was like, "No." And anyway, I just remember sitting there pondering it, and then he gave me the answer, and he was just like, "Because Jesus never questioned who he was.
Mhm.
He always knew who he was." Anyway, yeah.
Or in moments of real challenge, he was affirmed
Mhm.
in significant ways.
Yes. Even just heard this that just this week, just reminded of, he was affirmed. God told him who he was. "You are my son, who I'm well pleased," right before he went into the wilderness to be tempted with his identity. Like, yeah, which I think is just such a beautiful reminder that oftentimes it's in those places of,
And then subsequently, the second time was on Mount Transfiguration, but then the first thing that happened in signs, wonders, and miracles for Jesus coming off the mountain was there was a boy brought up that had been tormented that the disciples could not get him set free in. And that was his first deliverance coming off Mount Transfiguration
mm,
while he held the tension between the frustration of the disciples and giving the boy freedom.
so good.
And so, yeah, I think there are a lot of times that curious questions can actually bring validation, whether it's us being reminded of something that we believe or recognizing that we're agreeing with something that is in contradiction
Hmm.
to who we are.
Yes. I think even in those moments when we are tempted, I always go back to, "But who do you say I am?" And let him reaffirm me even in those moments.
Any parting thoughts?
Learn to ask questions. Get
Tell them.
curious. Get curious about yourself. Reach out if you want to know, like, what's getting in your way. Like, what are you motivated by? Are you motivated out of fear? Are you motivated out of love? And or um who are you? I think that's the greatest question. And if you can't answer with like real specific words, there's more curiosity to engage. And I think even I shared this recently. I've had this same like identity words for over a decade of just that I know God spoke. And it's been really interesting in this season to hear even more like really specific words that I feel like he's just affirming me in this season. Like, this is who you are. And so there's always something more to learn.
For
Yeah.
sure.
I think that's again why the four beasts can circle the throne for eternity singing holy, 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 because there's always something new to discover.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Well, as has been uttered, if you would like someone to ask you really hard questions, feel free to reach out. Otherwise, stay tuned for our future episodes of Convo with the Columns.